I love that song. It's a very powerful and energetic song. When I first asked my good friend Bruce Flummer and his wife Lorna to please pick out a song that would represent me, he said Barracuda. This is what I thought of. What are you trying to tell me, Bruce? So today we're here to talk about authentic leadership. And so many people have very different understandings of what authentic leadership is. Many people think about the different buzzwords that come along with leadership and think it's just another one. Is authentic leadership just another one of those? Well, as a professor of leadership, one of my passions is being able to read through all the research out there and distill things down to some very simple concepts. So what I'd like to do is talk with you about authentic leadership in the context of the stories that we tell. And it's really going to be 3 simple points. The first story, the second story, and the third story. Can't get much simpler than that. So when we talk about what the first story is, the first story is a very powerful story because it comes from the context of our past. The first story is the set of experiences that we have in our past, the relationships that we've had, the painful experiences that we've had with discrimination, with abuse, with pain, with people making fun of us in our school. All of those stories and experiences make up our first story. So if I were to share with you a little bit about my first story, I was born in Portland, Oregon, raised with a family, alcoholic family, and I grew up with quite a bit of abuse growing up. At 1.5 years old, I lost my hearing. So I grew up in the school district, being made fun of and discriminated against, and people would tell me all the things that I couldn't do. Well, I grew up with that. The abuse through the years got worse to the point where I was 16 and I was emancipated from my family because I just couldn't deal with that anymore. I needed to get out on my own and try to make a difference. But if I were to lead with that story, there's a lot of pain and hurt and bitterness and anger that come from that story. Leaders who lead from that kind of past they end up being paranoid, codependent, passive-aggressive. How many of you know anybody that has any of these qualities? Yeah? These are the kind of leaders that lead with their first story. They allow their past to dictate how they were to be. So if I were to lead from this story, I'm going to be very paranoid, I'm going to be codependent with everyone around me, and I'm going to be passive-aggressive. People with an abusive background typically display these kind of behaviors. But the first story is also important. It's not that the first story should be dismissed. The first story tells us a lot about how we deal with our experiences. Right? How many of you have triggers, things that trigger you every now and again? That rant that you have that Rachel talked about. These are the things that still, if we go through the book in life, these are the things that still need to be processed. Right? These are the painful things. If something triggers us, well, you know what? There's probably something we need to deal with. So that's the first story. Now the second story is a little bit different. The first story is you lead from your past. The second story is when you lead from your set of experiences, things that you've achieved. For example, if I were to talk about my second story, I would say, hey, I'm the dean of the School of Applied Leadership. I'm a black belt in karate. I'm a published author, a keynote speaker. I get out there and travel the world. Well, that sounds pretty impressive, right? Well, that's my second story It's my list of accomplishments. But what didn't you hear? I didn't say anything about who I am. I just listed off my accomplishments. But the problem is, when we lead from this second story, there's a disassociation with our past, right? We're listing all of our accomplishments. Oh, I am so great because of everything that I've done. Well, you're missing something. There's a lack of approachability there. But it's not that the second story is a bad thing. For example, when you came into the room, many of you came with your second stories. Hi, my name is Kelly. What do you do? Oh, I do this. What do you do? And you share the things that you do. I don't think any of you came in here and started talking about the abuse in your past, right? No, we lead with our second story. We put our best foot forward. When we go to interviews, or when we talk with our clients, we put our best foot forward. The second story is important, but it's not what will give you authentic leadership. Instead, when we lead with the list of accomplishments, some of the things that happen, we've got compulsive leaders and narcissistic leaders. Anybody compulsive? Narcissistic? Exactly. Bruce here is raising his hand. Compulsive? No. These kind of things in our leadership, if we're not careful, these kind of behaviors keep us from being close to other people and building the relationship and being able to lead in a powerful way. But now there's the third story. We talked about the first story being from our past, the second story focusing on our accomplishments, and now we're going to talk about the third story. I love this quote by Brené Brown. Loving ourselves through the process of owning our story is the bravest thing we will ever do. Now, why is that? The third story is where you can hold that first and second story in balance. Yes, I had a very difficult childhood, but look at what I've been able to do. You have had difficult challenges in growing up, but look at what you've been able to do. These are amazing stories. This is all part of who we are. It also creates this interdependence. In the first story, there was a dependence on other people, or overly dependent being, just in the abusive situation. In the second story, you're very independent. Both of those have their place. We're not dismissing those. But the power comes when we create that interdependence, when we recognize our need for other people in powerful ways, not in a codependent way. But I would not have been able to accomplish the things that I've gotten to do if it hadn't been for the amazing people on my journey who have loved me enough to speak the truth to me, to tell me, you know what, Kelly, you need to change, and help me grow, to be there with me, to inspire me, to pull me up out of the muck so that I can start making good decisions. All of these are part of the third story. This is where authentic leadership comes in, is when you can hold those two in balance. Authentic leaders who are able to lead from their story, I love this is how they show up. There's a confidence that comes from third story, right? There's an ability to genuinely ask questions of each other because you're free from judgment of yourself and free from judgment in others. That's not to say that we won't have stereotypes. These are the things that we all work through. But they're a part of our story that we can let go of some of the judgment that we have. And show up, and be present, and be confident in who we are. Another aspect of an authentic leader is someone who's always learning and growing. I have the privilege of teaching in our leadership programs, and one of the best things about teaching executives and superintendents and principals from all over Washington State and online, I get to watch each and every one of them grow from the person they are when they come in to the person that they want to be, somebody that they love being, to watch them expand their leadership capacity, but first by loving and appreciating themselves so that they have free to love others and to give their best to others. It's a really powerful thing. Too often when we lead with our first story, we've got our past and our history there, but it's a painful place. If we can not hold on to that too tight, and not hold on too tight to the accomplishments and everything that we do, and hold those in balance, it's a beautiful thing. I want you to think for a moment about the stories that you tend to lead from. How do you show up? Do you show up pessimistic and negative about, we all know people who show up in our offices and in our homes and our clients who are just negative and pessimistic about everything. Anybody know anybody like that? Yeah. It's draining. When they're always that way, it's draining. Or if we show up and they're always on, and, oh yeah, I'm doing so great. Oh yeah, I've got all this together. Sorry, but I can't relate to that. I can't. But somebody who shows up and who's with me, who's present, who gives to me as I give to them, who encourages me as I encourage them, these are powerful relationships, whether they're friendships or work relationships or client relationships. They're powerful. But think about where you show up. And what steps will you take to embrace that third story, balancing those two? And how will you keep on learning and growing? I've got this picture up here of a bonsai tree. Why? The bonsai tree is such a perfect example in my mind, it's a visual for me, of just how imperfect can become something so amazing, beautiful, and powerful. But when you look at that bonsai tree, it didn't just grow there. It had to be carefully pruned. People had to attend to it. They had to look at, okay, I'm going too far this direction, I need to make it go this direction. But having oversight in the whole image. It's a powerful image for me because it makes me believe that even in all of my imperfections, there is something really beautiful and imperfect in that. So that's what I want to close with. I would love to hear from you in terms of any questions or thoughts that you have about leadership or authentic leadership, first, second, and third stories and how you show up. I would love to hear from any of you. But thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I appreciate it.